In this part of the video, we're going to cover how to import drive cycles through the GUI and through scripting in MATLAB. So through the GUI, you go to your Autonomy tab, and then you go to this button, Import Cycles. In here, you'll have two options. You can import a single map file, or you can import all the map files that are in a folder. For the purpose of this video, I'll just import one cycle that I have here, and I'll share with you as well. So this is an example cycle and it's a map file. So I'm going to open it, and then it also gives me the option to pick where I want my cycle to be imported to. So I'll just import it to the process file within that project folder. And then also the set to group is user, and then I'll show you after we import the cycle, I'll show where this becomes relevant. So let's hit import. Now my cycle has been imported, and if you go to workflows, run a vehicle, I know we haven't covered this, but I'm gonna pick a random vehicle and I'm gonna go to processes, and I'm gonna go here, run cycle users. And in here, I'm gonna have my example cycle. So when you're importing that cycle, you can also pick where you want to be able to see your cycle inside these trees. So here's where we pick to put it, to import it. So if we go back to this autonomy, import cycle process is very simple. What's important is how you manipulate your data to generate that cycle. So I'm going to load this data mat that I imported. So I'm using here the launch mat, and then it pops up the command window. So now I loaded my map file, and then I have this variable in it called ch cycle that has a certain number of rows. It has two columns. The first column is time in seconds, and then the second column is the speed in meters per second. So this is the speed versus time trace. Then you'll also need this variable called ch grade. And as you can tell, this has two different number of rows, but they all end at the same time. So 764 is the end time of the ch cycle, and then the end time of the ch grade is 764. So this ones need to match. And then this is the grade versus the time trace, and they could be, so if you don't have any grade, you could just make this variable with 0. Lastly, the other one that you have is the ch key on, and this when the key is on the vehicle versus the time. So for this case, for this example, we always have the vehicle on, and so this is the on time, the right column, and then the left column is the time. And then you see that all the time, the final time matches in all the columns, on all the variables, sorry. So you just have to make sure that that is the case. I'm here in my projects folder, and I'm gonna go to session 1. And if you remember, we imported our cycle into this processes folder. So you'll see that Amber automatically generated 2 files. One is the A cycle file, and then another is the map file. So if you go into this A cycle, you'll see you have a display name, which is the name that you see in the workflow in the GUI. You'll also have your file name that needs to match this example cycle.map file. You'll also have your group, which you can edit here, or you can edit when you're importing the cycle. There's also, if you see here, the variables that my map file had, my grade, my cycle, my key on, and there's also this ch metadata that we didn't cover, but you'll also have to add it once you're importing your cycle. And what this has is this or what's important for you to add is this ch metadata name. That's what you need to do before you can import the cycle. Just make sure you have your vehicle trace, your grade, your key on, and your ch metadata name. In this case, we have another set of variables, but these were calculated separately, and they're not necessary in order for you to import a cycle. Now I'm going to import a cycle into Amber using just MATLAB scripting. I open my MATLAB R2020B, and I'm in this projects folder, session 1. And the first thing that you need to do to initialize your Amber into MATLAB is to right click on a startup and then run it. This will initialize all of the workflows, all the functions that are embedded within Amber. And it'll also add all the libraries into your path. So what I mean by this is if you remember, I'm going to open my A project file. I have my autonomy comment, my energy, my processes, but I also have this session 1, which is C Amber session 1. So I'm going to go here, and you'll see that all of these are in light gray, meaning they're not in my path, but session 1 was added into my path. So I have access to all of these files that are here. So I'm going to go into this folder, and you'll see that I have a text file. I'm going to open it. And this is an example of the UDS cycle. And I have 2 headers, and then I have my time and my speed. So what I did is I created a copy of that same file, but I just removed the 2 headers at the top, but it's the same data. You'll also see here that I have my example cycle from when we imported it using Amber. And I'll make sure to share all this data with you. And I also have this script here called import a cycle. So let me open it. So I want to go through this script with you. So the first thing that I do is that I read my text file. Then I use this text scan function to read the 2 columns. Sorry, I'm not reading here. I'm opening my file. And in this, I'm reading my 2 columns as doubles. So let's run this 2 lines. And you'll see down here that my CH cycle, since I have my 2 columns, my time and my speed, I added those to this CH cycle, which is where I store my vehicle, my speed trace. But you see these are cell arrays. So text scan will usually read them as cell arrays. So I'm going to use line 6 here to remove that cell array. So if I go and check my CH cycle again, you'll see that it looks a lot like the map file that we use when we imported the cycle using Amber. So this looks good. I forgot, I'm gonna close my file because I open it, and I should close text file. And then in line 6, we remove cell array. Now, if we go on the text file, we see that we have the time in seconds, which is good, but we also have the speed in miles per hour. So we have to convert the speed from miles per hour to meter per second. So I call this PFX unit function. This is a built-in function from Amber that you'll have access once you run your A startup. And you have a lot of functions in here. So you just put period. You'll be able to find this mile per hour to meter per second. So line A just converts my speed from miles per hour to meter per second. And then the data that we have only includes the speed, the time and speed, but in order to import the cycle into Amber, we need the CH grade, then the Keon, and the metadata. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to assume that we don't have any grade, and I'm going to assume that my vehicle is always going to be on. So I'm going to run line 10 through 12. So this first column is going to be, so this is my initial time, which will always be 0. And then this is my final time, which is going to be my end time from my speed trace data. Or that's why we call the CH cycle N1. So this is the last value in that time column. And that I'm going to assume that that is also my final time for my CH grade. And I'm going to set my grade to always be 0. And I'm going to do something similar with my key on, and I'm going to set my time to 0, my initial time to 0, my final time to the same time as my CH cycle, and I'm going to set my CH key on to always be 1. Let's put this one in 2. And then the last variable that we need is this CH metadata. And then I'm just that name, and I'm just going to call it example cycle 2. So let me run my key on, which I haven't run, and then my metadata. I want to save. So now that I have all my variables, so if you go to my workspace, I have my cycle, my grade, my key on, and my metadata. And I want to save this into a map file. And I'm going to save it into my process, into my session 1 project folder, process folder, example. So this is where the location I want to save my metadata. And then I'm going to save all my variables, CH cycle, CH grade, CH key on, and CH metadata. I'm going to save it. And then I'm going to call this function pxsef import drive cycle, which is an Amber function. And I'm going to give the map file location to this function, and then I'm going to run it. So I'm going to go back into my projects folder. Processes here. So we have the example 1 cycle that we imported using the GUI, and now we have the import cycle 2, which it just got imported. So I'm going to open here, and you'll see it has my display name, which is my ch metadata.name, my example cycle 2 map, which is this one at the top. And then I also have my groups, my group, which is set to user. Well, let's say I want this to be different. So I want to do user test. So this is going to be inside my user, and it's going to have another branch that's going to be called test. Now I'm going to go to my Amber, which I had opened from when we first imported the cycle using the GUI. But I want to see my second cycle. So I'm going to go to run a vehicle. I'm going to select a random vehicle. I'm going to go to select processes. And under users, you'll see that I have my example cycle, but I don't have the new cycle that I just created. That should be under user test. So I'm not seeing it And this is because I had already opened I had my Amber open throughout the process, so that new file has not loaded into the new workflow. So I'm gonna close this workflow and I'm gonna go back to autonomy and I'm gonna hit reload files. So if there's any new files that have been added to the libraries, they'll now get reloaded. So I'm going to go back again into my workflows, run a vehicle, select the random vehicle, go to select process, and I'm going to go to user. And now I see I have a new branch called test. And in this branch, I have my example cycle 2. So that's how you can import a cycle using the GUI or using MATLAB.